of jibber-jabbering until I know that we are actually where we should be.
Brilliant.
So what I do is I go and look on my phone to see if we've arrived. We've arrived, Mark. We are on Facebook.
Good afternoon. Finally, we're on Facebook again.
Again, good afternoon. Hello, everybody. It's me again in my little red room. I am very excited to be joined by Dr. Mark Brown now. Mark's been somebody that our parents talk to us about on a regular basis, and we're often asked, can we have Mark Brown come and help parents? And you and I, Mark, have a long history now.
Yeah, I would say so, yes.
Mark, I often say saved my life on a few occasions and certainly helped with my children in all sorts of things. So we're really excited to have you. We're focusing this year in our annual event on the early years. We had a really interesting discussion with the team earlier in the year thinking, well, what does early years mean? So in the systems, they tend to talk about 0 to 4. The health system will talk about preconception or conception to 2. And we actually thought, well, actually, we should be looking at up to 6, because until you get your kid established in school, things kind of feel early years-ish. And the other thing I wanted to say really before we get going is we also know that a lot of the issues that parents have with little children, when we've got children with additional needs, we often have the same kind of issues that last for a long time. I still have one who doesn't eat properly, and this, don't even get me started on sleep. Just no behavior, social skills. So I'm really excited to have you. Mark, would you like to start by introducing yourself to our lovely families?
Okay. So I'm Mark Brown. I only use the doctor term if I need to annoy someone, usually professionals. What I do is, to give you an idea of my background, I've worked with people with neurodiverse issues for 39 years now. I started when I was very young.
You look very good on it.
Yeah, not the moment with my arm. I'm learned disability nurse by core qualification, but I've done other things along the way. And for the last 12 years, I've been working as an independent after working in the NHS. And what I do is I class myself as an independent special needs consultant. So I come generally into people's homes. I work with, the idea is to try and work with the individual and then work with the family, because I tend to find if I can work with the individual and get to know the individual, work out how they're processing the world, what else is going on in their life, then it means that any approaches that we use for whatever areas become more person-centered and are more successful. So we're actually doing stuff with the person rather than to the person. I cover a whole range of ideas and areas, although generally I am known for things around anxiety, sexuality, puberty, and the such. But I do work with all ages. It used to be working just up to the age of 18. Now I seem to be working with anybody and everybody. So I'm working with adults as well as young ones around a whole different set of stuff. And that's me.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much. I know we've talked a lot, haven't we? You joined us last year for our preparation for adulthood, but it felt as though you could really give some insight for our younger families. I think a lot of it is, we talked a little bit earlier before we came on about who it is you work with, and that early years period feels so uncertain for many of us. We don't know if our child has got a difference or a difficulty. We may be tearing our hair out, but how do you know if it's something that needs more specialist support or a different way of parenting? How do you come to identify those? And I suppose it leads me to that question of, who do you work with?
So with me personally, I work with anybody and everybody. I think in the time I've been independent, my youngest person I've worked with was probably 3 or 4 years old, and had obvious difficulties. But there again, you know, I tend to look at it. I tend to like to be proactive. Now I know quite a few services they tend to like to be reactive. But I tend to think, you know, if we can be proactive, we can avoid hassle. And you know, when I get told by people, well, you know, things need to be done in 6 sessions. If we were proactive, it probably would be done in 6 sessions. When we react, those 6 sessions are just about finding out what's going on. So I like to work proactively with individuals, and you know, I also work with people that don't have a diagnosis. And one of the reasons I tend to find with that is because services these days are very fixated on a diagnosis and putting people into a box. And even when we look at the realms of autism, you know, there are quite a few of the individuals I work with who are autistic do not actually receive a service from learning disability services because they haven't got a learning disability, and they won't receive anything from the mental health service because it's not a mental health issue. And I think especially when you look at the younger end of the scale, regardless of what the neurodiverse issue is, although there are some, for example, such as Down syndrome, and you know, those obvious ones where you can actually there will be some form of service out there somewhere, but where it's the more unknown, or the more dubious as to whether it not is it that there's neurodiverse issues, is it that there's something else that's just a little bit behind, because it's recognizing there are some people whose development does not follow what the book says and go, right, okay, this month you're going to be doing this, and this month you know, when I'm working with those individuals, yes, it is about seeing whether there's any underlying issues, but actually it's at that age I tend to find it's more about what is going to help. And often what then happens is, as you're exploring certain aspects, so for example, if I was working with somebody who had issues with their behavior, we might put in place some strategies that may be linked with autism, may be linked with something else completely different. To me, if it works, it works. It doesn't matter the approach. But then you might find later on, you know, a year or so down the line, right, okay, we can now see that, yes, that part of it has been dealt with, but what we're left with is, you know, there is a diagnosis to be made. And I think that's one of the difficulties for the younger families, or the families with the younger children, because we don't necessarily, services don't necessarily go, let's see what we can do now. It's more of a case of, well, they're too young for us to diagnose, or they're too young for us to get involved. And what that means is we miss a whole load of years that we could be doing something.
So what's really interesting about what you're saying is that in working, so we're really fortunate at Family Voice in that we have a door into the more strategic conversations at the local authority and with health partners. And there has been for a year or two in Surrey a real determination to change that culture and to identify meet needs early, and that we shouldn't be relying on a diagnosis. What's really frustrating and difficult, I think, is how do we get that culture change to go down to the front line of those professionals who are seeing the children, who also have a caseload of really complex children who didn't get that and feel more urgent. So it's really interesting to hear from an outsider. I have a question from a parent that's just come in, and I'm just going to say it as it is, because then you can answer it. They said, are you somebody that we can self-refer to?
Yes, although at the moment I'm so overrun. What I do say to people at the moment, and I'm having a review of everything because there are so many people that are wanting input, is I'm actually, especially with the younger ones, and especially if we're doing things like toilet training, behavior, what I'm saying to people is contact me. These are things that potentially it's more about me having a conversation with parents and going, right, let's look at strategy. So I'm now doing a lot of Zooms, for example. Yes, we had all the lockdown anyway, but it's actually shown that there's a cluster of areas where doing it through Zoom, it empowers the parents, because to be quite honest, and I've always said this, most parents actually know exactly what they should be doing. Us professionals are the ones that make it feel difficult. And I've always said this, I'm not an expert of anybody's child. I know a little bit, I've been around far too long, but I'm no expert on anybody's child, and I go by what I'm being told, what I'm seeing. And most parents actually do know, but sometimes it feels as though, they need that reassurance that actually it is okay to do that. There is no problems with those sorts of things. So what I'm trying to do is I am trying to streamline things so I can help a few more people. And one of the ways is to be able to do Zooms and be able to provide advice and occasionally see the child, just because it helps for me to get it all into perspective. So yes, if people want to self-refer, they can quite easily refer to me. Just be warned. I mean, and now that I've done my shouldering, I'm a little bit but also it is a case of I have got quite a busy caseload, so it's very much a case of I would just get back as soon as I can, but please feel free.
It's really, we will obviously put your website and contact details on this. What we find through Family Voice, we often hear of kind of magic people, I call them. We've got two magic people this annual event. We've got yourself and we've got Yvonne Newbold, whom I know you work with closely as well. And the difficulty, I suppose, is that you become overrun, don't you? You are only one person, and what we really need is for systems to work differently.
Yeah, and I think the difficulty I have is that systems are too set in their way. I mean, I've been involved in a number of occasions where some of the early years, some of the children's services have sort of said, "Oh, we're going to revamp." Usually the mental health services, and not just in Surrey, although I have been involved. And often the one thing I always say to people is get off your backsides and go and see the people in their homes, because you will see a different thing entirely, different behaviors, different outlooks. You've also got that issue of anxiety, regardless of how old the child is. If they've got somebody who's highly anxious, and then we're saying to them, come to my office that you don't know, and you don't know me, and I'm going to ask you lots of questions. Whereas doing stuff like going in somebody's home, but you've seen me playing. I will play with anything and everything if it's going to help. And whether it's for the older ones playing on Xboxes, whether it's with the younger ones playing with Lego, all those sorts of things, because it's a way for them to feel more comfortable, and also it gains access into their world. Because if you've got, for example, I've had some individuals that have been reception age who have got limited verbal skills, and we've played with Lego, and we've suddenly discovered a whole world of issues because of the way they've played with their Lego, or we've used Lego faces for emotions, because it's, we're talking very basic sort of approaches, but for that age we're just looking at providing the building blocks, the foundation for their understanding. And it's not rocket science. It's a case of it's just being able to remove ourselves from offices, and just go out and work with the individuals.
I was thinking when you were talking about that when you first started coming to help us, I was home educating my son at the time because I felt like I had no choice. And I remember you telling me that because of the way your work was structured back then, a lot of the time you saw parents, you didn't see the individual. And we started, I remember we started with looking at rewards and, star charts and all things. And actually, as you got to know him better, that clearly, did not work. But it's true that playing with him, and you were able to communicate with him in a way that I couldn't. You saw things there that allowed us to approach him and help him differently. And you're right, is we need the system to have enough capacity to do that. And we can't rely on a few magic people who use 27 hours in each day instead of looking after themselves sometimes.
And I think also it enables both parents to be involved. When I used to work for the NHS, I very rarely saw a dad, because dads were working. Because we worked 9 to 5, and that was it. And I'm sure, in fact, I know there were a number of occasions where the dad said it's like having a third person in the marriage, because they'd come home and the mum would go, "Oh, I saw Mark Brown today," and for goodness sakes. Whereas now, because of working, I work evenings and I work some Saturdays, you actually get to talk with both parents, and you get to see both parents with the child. And I always say, regardless of how far apart two parents' parenting approaches are, both have something to bring to the table. We just need to work out which bits are best for that situation. And you can't do that if you're talking to only one. You have to talk with two and get a feel for the situation. I
love the fact that you've brought dads in, because we know, our membership of Family Voice is overwhelmingly mothers. We've got a few dads. We're really keen to bring them in. And actually, I think we follow you. We stalk you on your little Instagrams and social medias and things. And you did a dads group, I think, recently. And so you're going to be, I believe, coming to do a Zoom evening for us.
I can't remember. I've got so many different bits.
Okay, I think it's the 6th of December, if memory serves. It will be on
sure it's in my diary somewhere.
and I think my understanding, but it'd be really good to hear it from you, is that you're offering a space that's going to be comfortable enough for dads and men who communicate, I suspect, in quite different ways to us jibber jabberers.
I'm just yes, I can confirm it is the 6th of December. I was panicking there a bit, thinking, oh my goodness. So I mean, what happened was, a number of years ago, I was asked by one of the schools. They'd done a survey for the parents, and they said one of the things that's come up is the fact that dads, when they go to workshops, are surrounded by women. They're scared to death about saying anything, and they don't have the chance. And often the workshops as well were during the day. So what I did at that point, I set up a dad's autism awareness group course, which was 6 evenings, and we talked. Basically, I did all the talks I ever do. We did during those six weeks. One of the rules that we always have is there's a couple of rules. There's no females allowed. So when I did it up in Sheffield once, it was females that were organising it, and I had to chuck them out the room. No females were allowed. Also, dads were allowed, if they were fed up of listening to the other half moaning about their approaches, or they were fed up of autism or any other neurodiverse issues, it was a place where they could vent their spleen and their frustration. And we did have a few that shed their tears as well, which was very, very interesting. So I've done that for a couple of years, and then during COVID, we did do it online, and I'm thinking about trying to do it again. But then what happened was, a couple of months ago, there was another organisation in Surrey, a peer, who said to me, would you do it in a pub? And I said, I can try it. And it worked. We had dads, a couple of dads that came, and it was a nice, relaxed atmosphere. And it was the idea of that group, and the same will be for the one that's on Zoom. It's a chance for dads to meet other dads. And I know that pub group has now continued, and they're doing another one at some point.
Brilliant.
And I think they're now bringing in different people to do talks, which I think is great. So it's about meeting, but it is also that that time for dads to ask questions, dads to be able to just say, well, okay, this is happening. I think this is what we should be doing. I do have to do a proviso on it with the dads, because there's been a few that have said, so when I go back to the other half and I tell them that you said they're doing it wrong, is that okay? I said, no. That's a disclaimer on that one. I don't, you take back what you want to. I don't say that I said they're doing it wrong. But it's just, I think it's it's really important that what we do is we do think about everybody else. We think about the dads, because the dads don't often get that chance. We think about the siblings. I've done sibling groups which have worked really well, and it's always interesting when I go to different areas that have never done these things before, and we do them, and the response. So I talked about Sheffield. I usually go up to Sheffield twice a year to do some work. And one year they decided they wanted to blitz me and sort of go, right, we're going to do a dad's group, you're going to do some workshops. Oh, and you're going to do a sibling group as well. We've never done a sibling group, so you can start it. And it's really interesting to hear the siblings afterwards sort of going, I've actually got a chance to breathe now, because I've let off steam. And the same has happened with the dads. The dads will often go, wow, this is really good. I can go home with some new ideas. I've asked my questions in the way I want to ask them, but also I can understand why my other half is doing the approach they're doing, because I've now catched on with what was going on.
And I think the opportunity, I imagine, also to be in a group where you can vent about, the fact that maybe your other half has forgotten that she's your wife and she's just being mum and she's just talking about all of the rubbish and with additional needs. I think a lot of mums, particularly when we're at home with little ones, dad comes home from work and we kind of go bleh about the frustrations of our days. And when we've got a child with additional needs, that's kind of more intense and it goes on for longer. And with, the number of conversations I've had where I've, even just recently, I had a rant to my lovely husband about blooming personal independence payments and work capability assessments, and we're entering the world of mental capacity assessments. And it's a job that in a lot of the families we speak to is taken on by mum. So as the mum, we have this really complex understanding of our child needs, because we're there a lot, and the professionals, because often we're the interface, and the whole bureaucracy. And that relationship with dad gets really tampered with, doesn't it?
And I think it's an important one, because working together. So I've been to a couple of meetings really recently where, and you know how much I love battling professionals and local authorities. I'm quite disappointed I've not had a good battle for a while. But where both parents have gone, and actually I think it provides a united front that professionals cannot necessarily battle against. And I think the difficulty parents have, certainly in my experience, is that professionals will only listen to what they want to listen to. And we all do it. I've had my moments where I've listened to something and gone, yeah, okay, we'll focus on that bit, but you learn quite quickly that actually we need to listen to a whole range of things. And I think often hear where, especially if it's one parent goes to a meeting and the professionals will go, oh yeah, fine, okay, and then completely ignore and wait for professionals. And I've even had it where I've had a parent who's written a letter to a professional, didn't get any response. I've copied and pasted that letter, put my name to it, and immediately got a response, and then had to go at the professional, because I've said, well, listen to the parents. If you've got a united front as well, and you've got both parents that are working together, it strengthens the fight against the professionals, because then they're not sort of aiming at one person. It's both that are on board.
I think that's a really important thing, and I've met a number of families where both parents do that, and it works really well. Personally, I think my husband joined me in one meeting He's busy, and it's kind of, we split our work that way. And what was really interesting was he came out of there, it took him a week to get over it. And partly there was an emotional aspect, but mostly he was saying, but they don't answer questions. And how did they get paid to do a job? And this is not how my job works. And we've been sat in a meeting for 2 hours, and I've asked the same questions 6 times, and nobody's answered them. And I looked at him down, yes, this is how it works. We plug away, we do baby steps, we do this, that, and the other. And I'd got very used to that little dance. And it was really interesting actually having his perspective. He did say, yes, no, you can carry on. But actually, you're right in that having that extra perspective and that extra strength of thing. And we still live in a society, don't we, where in a professional setting, men tend to get taken a little bit more seriously than women, especially mums. But it's really interesting because we hadn't planned to talk about dad specifically. And yet, actually, it feels like that's probably the most important thing. And how do you help a dad become and be that inner dad person, particularly when they've got a little one? Because it takes a bit of, how any words of wisdom?
So, I mean, and it's one of the things I always talk about when I do the dad's course. We talk about grief. We talk about the fact of actually, in a sense, you are grieving the child that you thought you were going to get. Same with mum. But as you sort of say, it's a case of with mum, often mums recognize it, don't necessarily deal with it, but because they've got to get on and do it. Dads will do other things. So, they'll go to work to, work late hours so they can avoid having to have those conversations. But it is one of the things that we talk about. And I think it's one of the things that everybody needs to remember, that you might not have physically lost the child, they may not have passed away, but actually you've lost the child that you were thinking of. And I know of at least a number of dads that were football fanatics, for example, and it's like, oh yeah, we're going to have a son, and oh, my son's been born. Oh, we can't play football. And I know a few that have set up their own little teams, so that they can play football with other boys. Not because they don't love their child, but because it's like, this is what I've got to go through. And it's then years later where they've suddenly started to go through the grief cycle. And I think it's both parents recognizing that grief cycle, both parents recognizing the unfortunate thing there again with professionals. You might get through most of the grief cycle, and then you meet a professional who goes, now tell me the history. So you then start the grief cycle again. And unfortunately, us professionals do not communicate, even if we're in the same organization. We do not communicate effectively with each other. So you parents have to go through that over and over again, which is extremely difficult for anyone. So often with dads, it's about getting them to recognize that is happening. It's getting them to recognize, and it's about everybody recognizing that everybody has got something to contribute to what is going on. How with some dads, I must admit, with some dads, they do have to be quite blatantly obvious. I did have one mum that realized if she put together a information sheet of the main points, that's how dad worked best. I will say I have done a PowerPoint presentation in somebody's lounge to a dad and to the extended family, because there again, it's it can be as well if you've got extended family members that are maybe saying, well, I don't think there's anything wrong, so your wife's talking nonsense. That can actually impact upon the situation as well. And then again, they're going through a grief cycle themselves. And I think, so it's sometimes it can be about being factual. It's about, having that chance to go, this is what's happening. The other thing as well is about having professionals or somebody from outside the family who will turn around and go, right, okay, let's talk about it. It is one of the things with the dads groups that especially when we do the 6 weeks, right at the beginning, I always say, why are you here? And they go, well, we're here to understand a bit more, but we got told by the other half we have to attend. By the end of it, I would say the majority will turn around and go, now we can understand what's going on, but we've never had the chance to do it. So,
Yeah.
you know, I would be saying that dads need to be as involved in workshops. Also, whether it's a dad, whether it's siblings, whether it's extended family, to get them to understand the issues. I always say to people, don't read up on the topic. Watch stuff on YouTube, particularly from people who experience it. So, for example, whenever I get anybody who is autistic, and it may be the person themselves that needs to understand a bit more, the family members, I will always say, read the books if you want, but they're black and white. You're not black and white. You're not a page in a book. Look on YouTube. Look at people like Rosie King, Dean Beadle, the people that have been there, done that, got the T-shirt, the people who recognise that life isn't black and white, and everybody is going to be different. There's going to be similarities, but there's, you know, even with individuals that are diagnosed with Down syndrome, I run a club for adults with learning disabilities. We have people with autism, people with Down syndrome. Each one is different. You know, yes, you have this stereotypical person who's got Down syndrome, who's got autism. You come into club, you will see there is no stereotype. They are all completely individual. And I think that's the key point. It's the understanding. It's the understanding that, you know, you're going through grief. It's the understanding about what is being neurodiverse all about, and how can we then help? Because ultimately, somebody can have a neurodiverse issue, but we can still help them. You know, whether it's they're delayed in toilet training, whether it's behavior stuff. You know, yes, you could say, well, it's because they're autistic, it's because of this, it's because they're that. We use that too often as a way to explain it. Yes, there are certain things that will be due to their diagnosis, but even those that I work with that are autistic, that have got social skills issues, there's a way to assist, reduce the impact, and anxiety. I have many that have got anxiety, from young ones right up to old ones. Yes, they're autistic, they will have anxiety, doesn't mean we can't help them. And I think this is the thing, it's getting past that diagnosis and going, we can help them, we can provide assistance. With family members, it's about being able to help them do that as well, go through that process and know, right, okay, we are going to have issues. This isn't going to be normal parenting. Going on normal parenting courses isn't going to work. We need to do something that's very specialized. But we can provide some assistance to improve the overall situation.
It's a fine line, isn't it, between that understanding what the difference is so that you can really help a child, and at the same time finding a way to realize that that child and that individual is just as human as any of us, and just as capable of a full and interesting and happy life, even if it doesn't look like what we consider to be the norm. And that's an incredibly complicated journey, isn't it? And quite unique one.
And I mean, I often, when I talk about puberty, we talk about social skills, and this applies to all ages. I often talk about the fact that we put such an emphasis on they've got to be able to socialize, they've got to be able to do this, got to be able to do that. But actually, that can cause more stress on them and on us. And it's more about what do they need to live? Yes, I've got some that will go off to nightclubs. They've gone off to university. They've gotten themselves in awkward situations, just like any other student. I've got others that have gone up. They've just stayed in their room. They've gotten on with their course. They're able to buy clothes or food, etc., etc. They are the people that don't want to go off partying, and we need to. I think sometimes we need to look at what we are doing concerning, right, they need to fit into this. Some will, some won't, and it's getting that fine line. I do have to say as well, though, there are some people that are neurodiverse who do sometimes maybe utilize their neurodiversity as an excuse. I have had a few that have gone, I can't do that because I'm autistic, and I go, behave, you can do it, you're just lazy today. But that's something that as parents and professionals, we need to try and work out what is neurodiversity and what is them just being them.
Yeah, and it's true that, you know, what you talk about, that difference is, I look at, you know, the early years and the primary school focus, and for me, as the parent of two autistic young people, all of the focus seemed to be on social skills. I had these two children who were very, very young readers, who were really good at maths, and school saw their deficiencies in social skills. So instead of celebrating that reading ability and that maths and giving them stuff they enjoyed doing, all of the focus became on, you've got to make friends. And they didn't want that. They didn't find that, you know, they found that really, really stressful. On the other hand, how do you help? You know, right now, my biggest conversation with this young man now is, I cannot be your everything for your whole life. It's too heavy. I don't want to be your only friend because I'm your mother. And frankly, you know, you're a boy that likes video games and all that kind of nonsense. And I think finding that balance can be really tricky, particularly when, as I say, when they're young. Everybody tells you that the most important thing is that they make friends and they socialize and social skills. I remember my father getting really exercised, annoyed, cross, passionate, shall we say, and saying, well, he's got to learn to say hello. I think, how? Why? You know, he can't do that. And we have this huge pressure, don't we?
Yeah, and I think, you know, when it comes to the social world, there again, it's how you're doing it. I mean, you know, I see social skills groups, and it's like like an AA meeting. We all sat around going, you know, oh, I'm here, my name's Mark, I'm here to learn social skills. The trouble is, it's very prescriptive. And I always, with COVID, it's given me a great analogy because as I say to people, right, okay, we often say to people, shake hands and say hello, look them in the face. Right, COVID came along, you're not allowed to shake hands, you're not allowed to look them in the face, and you're not allowed to talk to them straight to the face. So all those people that have now learned that, it's completely screwed up for them. Whereas what I tend to think is, it's about using their interests. It's about, you know, being able to get them to engage with other people around maths, around Lego, around, you know, Harry Potter, around any number of things, because in a sense, it then gives them the confidence because they can talk about that one subject with somebody else who also wants to talk about it and expand. I had somebody who won't talk to anybody. Put them in Comic-Con, dressed up.
Yeah.
They got arrested by Darth Vader. They chatted with everybody and anybody, and it was because they had their interest. And because they had their interest, their social skills, they have got perfect social skills. Just because they don't say hello when they're not dressed up and at Comic-Con doesn't mean they can't actually deal with life. It's just, you have to get it right. And I think that's one of the difficulties. We do these things. We do it too structured.
Yeah, and it's finding, you're right. It's, why should I make a connection with somebody I'm not interested in? Comic-Con, I have to say, I wish I'd gone much earlier. It's one of the safest, most wonderful environments for people with additional needs. Brilliant place, I have to say. You know, I completely recommend Comic-Con.
Exactly, and it's one of the reasons. I mean, you know what I tend to do when I come on visits. I mean, now it's, you know, we play on Roblox, we play Fortnite. I have to take my Nintendo Switch everywhere just so I've got that to play with. But it's because it's that focus. You know, when I'm working with younger ones, it's now having to know what Peppa Pig's doing, and in the night garden,
the Octonauts.
Exactly. So it's all about those sorts of things, knowing those and using those as a way into that person for them to be able to socialize, to gain that confidence. And I think that's sometimes where, for example, when parents say to me, "Oh, how do we get involved with especially the younger ones?" Actually, just get on with it. Just get in there and start talking and playing with those sorts of things, because that's the entrance into that child's world at that point in time. And if you can gain entrance into that, I hate to say this, I still remember the conversation with your young man when we were talking about Mario and in the center of the world and the teleportation machine for the present up to the satellite around the world. But that was how he wanted to talk about things. And I think that's when we got him really interested in maths, because he was just like, oh, yes, you need to use maths for the rocket.
Exactly.
It's just getting into that world.
Mark, I've just had a look at my clock, and we're going to have to wind up, but that feels like a really lovely place. It is get to know your child, because whatever their need, whatever their age, they will have something they're interested in. And if you can tap into that, then that gives you a connection to then go out into the rest of the world, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining us. As ever, I'm going to say, because I volunteer people I speak to, if any of you have questions, we will be collecting feedback, and I will be on Mark's back and say, Mark, have you got any ideas for this? Thank you, as ever. All of you who we know, for example, we do have some people booked into that dad's event. Interestingly, I believe most, if not all of them, have been booked on by ladies, because we do the doing, don't we? But I think Mark gave a really beautiful description of how that can be, and I'd absolutely, be thrilled not to see any dads at the event, because I do not qualify, I won't be there. But I really hope that we can offer something to bring dads into the mix, because they are really, really important.
Definitely.
Thank you very much, Mark. I'm going to press stop on everything now. Here we go. Bye-bye.